The first thing I tasted when I came home was blood. Travis's fist crashed into my face on the same porch where my dad once taught me how to sand wood. My suitcase fell, my mother froze in the doorway, and he leaned in, breath sour with beer, and said, "You don't live here anymore." The bruise would fade. Those words wouldn't. Because what he didn't know was I owned the one thing he was trying to sell, and I was done running back to this house and this name. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family, because what happened on that porch was only the first crack. The truth hiding behind my father's workshop would hit much harder, and it would change everything. I grew up inside the sound of hammers and the smell of salt air. Lane Boatworks wasn't just my father's shop, it was the backbone of our lives. The tide hit the pilings beneath the floorboards so rhythmically that sometimes I swore the building breathed with us. Dad used to set me on the workbench, hand me a thin strip of cedar, and say, "Listen, Harp. Wood tells the truth if you stop talking long enough to hear it." I didn't understand him then, but years later those words would come back like a warning. Back then I ran from school straight to the workshop. My mother yelled at me to wash my hands first. Dad pretended not to hear her. He'd guide my hands along the grain, steady and patient, as if the whole world slowed down for us. When I was 9, we designed a boat together. My lines were crooked, my proportions terrible, but he taped the sketch to the wall like it belonged in a museum. Mom rolled her eyes, muttering about encouraging delusions, but I saw the way she softened whenever he laughed. Those were the years when exhaustion hadn't turned into resentment yet. Everything changed the winter he collapsed for the first time. One moment he was sanding a hull, the next he was gripping the edge of the bench, knuckles white, insisting he only stood up too fast. His face told a different story. Fear rooted itself in me that day, a cold, quiet seed that never fully died. By the time I reached 21, that seed had grown into a storm. I was halfway through architecture school when a neighbor called, not my mother. I drove 4 hours through sleet only to learn I was too late. My mother sat in a plastic hospital chair, arms wrapped around herself, eyes empty in a way I'd never seen. It was his heart, she said. But even then, something about the story felt unfinished, like there were pieces no one wanted to name. I didn't know it then, but that feeling would return years later, louder, sharper, impossible to ignore. After Dad died, the workshop felt like a church no one prayed in anymore. His tools sat exactly where he left them. The half-finished hull he'd been shaping still held the curve of his last touch. Every time I stepped inside, it felt like walking into a ghost that didn't know it was gone. My mother didn't step inside at all. She stayed on the couch, lights off, blankets pulled around her like armor. Bills piled up. Letters from the bank came faster than she opened them. I called every Sunday, offered to come home, but she always said, "Focus on school, we'll be fine." But we weren't fine, and she wasn't fine. And I was too young to understand the difference between surviving and drowning. Our last real fight happened in the kitchen. She accused me of trying to control her life, and I accused her of letting everything fall apart. Neither of us meant the things we said, but words cut deeper when they come from people who share your blood. I left that night, slammed the door harder than necessary, and returned to Boston, telling myself distance would make everything simpler. It didn't. It only sharpened the edges. San Francisco came next, project skyscrapers, deadlines, clients who loved the precision I inherited from my father. But every victory tasted slightly bitter, like I was building over a story I had never finished reading. Still, once a year I sent money home. Property taxes, repairs. Random expenses my mother said came out of nowhere. I didn't know it then, I'd tell myself later, but every payment was a lifeline I thought I was cutting. Then came the email. No greeting. No softness. "Harper, we've decided to sell Lane Boatworks. The buyer wants a fast process. Sign your share. You'll get 10,000. 10,000 for my father's life's work, for the place he built with his hands and taught me to love with mine." I reread the message 3 times, waiting for grief, anger, panic, anything. Instead, something else settled inside me. Something colder, steadier. I booked the flight home that night. Not to fight, not to beg, but because I suddenly knew deep in my bones that the story of my father's workshop wasn't over. And when I finally stepped back into that workshop 12 years later, I would learn just how much had been buried there. When my plane touched down in Maine, I promised myself I would stay calm, mature, rational. That promise lasted exactly 6 minutes, the time between stepping out of the cab and taking Travis's fist to the side of my face. Pain flared, but clarity hit harder. My mother had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. At the motel, the heater rattled like it was dying, and my cheek throbbed in the mirror. I laid out every document I'd saved over 12 years: bank transfers, tax payments, old repair invoices. The paper trail was undeniable. I hadn't abandoned Lane Boatworks. I had quietly kept it alive. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom clutching Travis's arm like I was the danger. So before sunrise, I drove to the workshop. Lane Boatworks looked nothing like the place my father built. The warm amber glow that once spilled from the windows had been replaced by harsh, sterile lights. A cheap vinyl banner reading "Reed Marine Design" hung where my father's carved sign once stood, a sign that took him 3 days to sand perfectly smooth. Inside, the smell hit me first. Not cedar, not varnish. Something chemical and sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. 2 men I'd never seen before were hauling sleek fiberglass hulls across the floor. Their movements were quick, efficient, practiced nothing like the slow, deliberate rhythm of real craftsmen. Travis paced nearby with a phone to his ear, gesturing angrily. "No," I said, "Wednesday. The shipment needs to be out by Wednesday." His voice carried through the room, slicing through the robotic drone of industrial fans. Shipment, fiberglass hulls, strangers, working in my father's shop at dawn. Nothing about it felt like boat building. Everything about it felt like a cover. I moved along the perimeter silently, instinct pulling me toward my father's bench. That's when I saw it faded, scrubbed unevenly but still unmistakable. A dark stain beneath the chair he used to sit in. Dried blood. My breath stopped. How? Why here? Why had my mother never mentioned an accident? A new kind of fear coiled in my stomach, not the fear of Travis, but the fear of truth. I left before anyone saw me. The cold air outside hit me so hard it felt like waking up. I drove straight to the diner on Harbor Road. The bell over the door jingled as I walked in, and before I could even take a seat, Jordan Hale turned around on his bar stool. Same lopsided grin, same grease on his hands, same instinct to read my face before I said a word. "You're back," he said softly. "And you're in trouble." I slid into the booth across from him. "Jordan, what do you know about Travis?" "Enough, apparently." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've seen him grab your mom's arm. Hard." She laughed it off, but it wasn't a joke. "And lately he keeps asking me weird questions about delivery windows, storage capacity routes with no police patrol." My stomach twisted. "Jordan? He's moving something through the workshop." He didn't argue. That scared me more than if he had. "And Harper?" He added quietly, "Your father. There were rumors back then. Accidents. Something about him falling in the shop before they took him to the hospital." The stain flashed in my mind again. What exactly had happened in that workshop before my father died, I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing: Travis wasn't the only secret buried there. The next morning, the snow outside Sam Whitlock's office looked soft and harmless. Inside, nothing felt harmless at all. Sam spread my documents across his desk: the transfers, the deed, the blurred screenshots of my mother's email. His eyes paused at the artisan clause, the one my father and I wrote together when I was 19. "This clause," he said, tapping the page, "is your leverage. If Travis is mass-producing anything, he's already violated it." But something else was bothering me. "Sam," I said slowly, "what if the workshop isn't just being misused? What if it's being used as a front for something illegal?" He didn't dismiss the idea. That frightened me more than if he had. By noon, Sam had filed an emergency injunction, but legal documents move slower than panic, and Travis moved faster than both. When I returned to the motel, I knew immediately someone had been in my room. Nothing was stolen, but my documents, carefully stacked that morning, had been disturbed. A page of the deed stuck out at an odd angle. My notebook had been moved 2 inches to the left. It wasn't the messiness that scared me. It was the message. He knew I was building something, and he wanted me to know he knew. I backed out of the room and drove straight to Jordan's garage. His space smelled like oil and cold metal, less threatening than the motel, more honest. "You okay?" he asked as soon as he saw my face. "Someone searched my room," I said. "Nothing missing?" "Everything moved." Jordan locked the door behind me. "There's something I didn't tell you yesterday." He pulled out a cardboard box, dusty and half-crushed, filled with the old security cameras he'd replaced last month. One of these still had a memory card inside. On his computer, the footage loaded, grainy, shaky, but clear enough. Travis, a truck, crates with serial numbers scratched off, a 2:13 a.m. timestamp, and the workshop lights glowing behind him. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. "He's storing stolen goods in my father's shop. And moving them out before sunrise," Jordan added. "This footage isn't enough for a conviction, but paired with forged signatures, he's in deep. Forged signatures." The thought dropped into my stomach like stone. Jordan. What if he forged my mother's, or mine? Jordan didn't look surprised. That said everything. "Harper," he said quietly, "men like him find weak spots. Your mother was grieving. Lonely." He saw an entry point. I rubbed my hands together, feeling the chill crawl up my arms. "This started long before I got here, didn't it?" He nodded. "Yeah, and I think your dad's death? I don't know. People whispered things back then. Nothing concrete. Just that he fell. Or that something happened in the workshop first." The stain flashed in my mind again, dark, uneven, hidden. My heart pounded slow and heavy. "What if Dad didn't just collapse?" I whispered. Jordan said nothing, and the silence was louder than any confirmation. Driving back to town, snow hit the windshield in sharp diagonal streaks, like the sky was trying to erase the road in front of me. For the first time, fear and purpose braided themselves together inside me. This was no longer about a workshop. No longer about a forged signature. No longer even about Travis. This was about the truth buried in the floorboards of a place my father loved. And I wasn't leaving Maine without uncovering it. The morning we confronted Travis, the sky hung low and heavy, the color of bruised steel. Sam sat in my passenger seat, the injunction in his briefcase, while Sheriff Peters followed behind us in a cruiser. My hands were steady on the wheel, not calm, just ready. Lane Boatworks loomed ahead like a wounded animal. Music blasted inside machinery, whining men shouting orders. But the moment we stepped into the shop, the noise fell flat, as if the building itself sensed what was coming. Fiberglass hulls sat in rows like bodies. Crates with scratched-off serial numbers were stacked near the loading bay. Two workers froze mid-lift, eyes darting between us and Travis. He turned slowly, beer in hand, at 9 a.m, a smirk sliding across his face. "Well, look who brought backup," he said. "Cute." Sam's voice was calm. "Travis Reed, we're here to serve an injunction effective immediately. You're to cease all operations and sales until ownership is legally determined." Travis laughed. "Linda owns this place. Harper's just throwing a tantrum because California didn't work out." I stepped forward and laid the original deed on my father's old workbench. The artisan clause glinted beneath the plastic sleeve. "This workshop," I said, "is protected. You violated every line of this clause the moment you brought in fiberglass and cheap imports." His jaw twitched. "Artisan clause. Who cares about some dusty?" Jordan's voice cut him off. "We do." He stood in the doorway, phone in hand, eyes locked on Travis with quiet fury. He tapped the screen. The video began to play. Travis on a loading dock at 2:13 a.m., a truck full of stolen electronics. Boxes carried into the workshop like contraband. The workers stepped back. One muttered, "Man, you said it was legit." Sheriff Peters lifted a document. "Travis, we also have confirmation these loan applications contain forged signatures, both Linda's and Harper's." My mother, trembling in the doorway, whispered Travis, "Tell them it isn't true." But he was unraveling. "You don't get it," he snapped. "Your dad's shop was failing. I did what I had to." "You used my father's name for crime," I said. "And you hit me when I questioned it." He lunged, not at me but toward the exit. The sheriff moved faster. The click of handcuffs echoed through the workshop like a final verdict. "You should have stayed gone," he hissed at me as Peters pulled him toward the cruiser. I stepped closer. "And you should have read the fine print." Snow began to fall outside, slow, icy flakes drifting through the open bay doors. My mother collapsed onto a stool head in her hands. The workshop creaked almost like relief as the last traces of Travis's lies were dragged out into the cold. For the first time in years, Lane Boatworks was silent. but it wasn't empty. It was waiting. Travis didn't fight the charges for long. With the video, Jordan handed over the forged signatures Sam uncovered, and the stolen electronics the sheriff pulled from the workshop the case built itself. He took a plea deal, 7 years in state prison. My mother sat in the back of the courtroom during sentencing, hands clasped so tightly the skin around her knuckles blanched. When the judge read the verdict, she whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time in years, I believed she meant it. But apologies are not repairs. They're invitations. And I wasn't ready to walk through that door yet. I stayed in Maine, at first only to clean up the legal wreckage Travis left behind. But each morning when I unlocked Lane Boatworks and smelled salt and cold wood, something in me steadied. The workshop wasn't dead, just bruised. Like me. Jordan dropped by more often than he admitted, carrying coffee or spare tools, pretending he needed to check the wiring again. Sometimes we worked in silence. Sometimes he joked about my California architect attitude. And sometimes, when neither of us said anything, the workshop felt almost whole again. One afternoon, while clearing the old storage racks, my broom snagged on a loose board. Under it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small bundle. Inside were my father's chisels, still oiled, still sharp, and a folded note in his handwriting. "For when you come home." My throat tightened. He'd known I would leave. He'd believed I would return. That belief hit harder than anything Travis had ever thrown at me. Later that night, sorting old paperwork, I found something stranger. A rolled blueprint with a date stamped 3 days before my father died. A design unlike his usual work. Sleeker. Riskier. Almost experimental. Why had he hidden it? Why had no one mentioned it? Why had a blood stain been beneath his workbench? Cold certainty slid through me. Travis wasn't the first secret in this workshop, and he wasn't the last. Lane Boatworks still had one more story buried beneath its floorboards, and this time I wasn't running from it. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you know the kind of silence that lingers long after the shouting stops. I came home expecting to sign papers and disappear again, but instead I uncovered lies, reclaimed a legacy, and found questions buried deeper than I ever imagined. The bruise on my face has healed. The truth inside Lane Boatworks hasn't. So if you've ever fought to take back what was yours, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe, because this story isn't finished, not for me, not for my father, and not for whoever tried to bury his final design.